Well, hello, thank you so much for joining me. I wanted to do a short video regarding the terrible tragedy that occurred last Sunday at Bondi Beach, where a father and son team decided to take it upon themselves to go on a turkey shoot and shoot Jews. We know they were exclusively targeting Jews because the son was seen on camera warding people away that were coming too close, who weren't Jews, and they were sort of fixing themselves into positions where they could get the best vantage point at the Hanukkah in the Park festival. The father at one point actually made his way off the bridge where he was assaulted, with the idea that he would be getting a little closer to the event because he had a shotgun which has less range than the high caliber rifle that his son was using. Thankfully, he was wrestled. They had that weapon wrestled off him, and he retreated back to the bridge. And I want to start out by thanking the New South Wales police force for all their efforts during the tragedy. I think 2 police officers were shot, and one of them's in a pretty bad way. But they did a really good job as far as I was concerned. There was some criticism there that they didn't engage maybe as quickly as they should have. But I definitely think they did the best thing, the best that they could do on the day. The people who are in the police force have a really tough job, and I don't think people respect their local police force as much as they should. It is a tough job. This is the only people that are constantly engaged in stressful situations. Topping off the going to the house of some parents who have to deliver the news that their son or daughter has passed away in a car accident, which is part and parcel of their job. If you join the police force, eventually you're going to be on that duty. And all the other things they have to witness: car accidents, people committing suicide. They're beyond human. They're special types of people. People who are active in the police force. We go down that route of serving the community, and so I've got nothing but respect for them. And that includes all the other heroes of the day, particularly the couple that first witnessed the terrorists disembark from their vehicle. It's kind of very strange because the father, he was technically had his firearm wrestled off him twice during the ordeal. First, when he got out of the car, because he had the shotgun wrestled off him, and he pulled out another gun and shot the man, Boris, I think his name was, and him and his wife subsequently died at the scene. And then he was later had the shotgun wrestled off him again by a fruiter, somebody that runs a Muslim man that runs a fruit shop. There was a lot of people sort of rose to the occasion, and that was something that I think was amazing. But in terms of the incident itself, I think even a blind man could have seen this coming. And I've been warning people from day one. I've put out videos on YouTube, on Rumble, on Facebook, on other social media platforms, warning of a coming Holocaust. We're entering a time where it's getting very similar to pre-World War II conditions, not only in terms of the general public being groomed to have a default disdain for Israel and for Jews, but also a climate where the world is poised for war. And I think we have to get our heads around that. And this video is mainly aimed at the average Australian who might click on it, because it's time that we start to switch on. I think we have to switch on, guys. And really, the reality is most Aussies won't really switch on unless their entertainment is encroached upon. Going out and seeing live bands, seeing live music or live shows, theatre productions or whatever. Sport, it's not until, the average Australian realises that maybe sport will have to be postponed. They'll have to postpone the NRL, the AFL, the tennis, the cricket, the women's soccer, and then all of a sudden you'll get people lining up to sign up to serve, so to speak. It's kind of a tragedy that's what it's got to come to, but no matter who you are, what your ideologies are, whether you are religious or non-religious, whether you're a Christian or whatever you are, you're going to have to get involved. It's that obvious now. And you cannot continue to just kind of swan along in your little world and think that it's not going to impact you, because it will. It's just a matter of time. And the reality is that the horse has already bolted. The horse has already bolted. What do I mean by that? I mean that it's too late, essentially. Even if we're all to wake up tomorrow in the right frame of mind to do the right thing, it is too late. But does that mean that we sort of crawl up into the fetal position and go somewhere to die? Absolutely not. We can still do our best to minimize the damage. Go into damage control, if you will. And so one of the ways we do this is to really let the Jewish community know that we are there in support of them. The Jews are very unique in terms of the way they conduct themselves in the diaspora and residing in a foreign nation. They have always respected the actual laws and culture of the nation in which they reside, and they conduct themselves in a way that is not it's not ostentatious. It is in a way that's very sort of subtle, and you wouldn't even notice that they're there. In comparison, if you look at the Chinese community, we have Chinatown in Sydney, and there's a Chinatown in Melbourne, I think in all the major cities as well. But in Sydney, you go into Chinatown and it's Chinatown, and it's got their language and their culture plastered everywhere, and they're even sort of moving into additional streets, and it kind of peters out as you kind of go out into the sort of the fringes of the community. But it's generally not a problem, because the Chinese are usually a very respectful people. Whereas Islam is concerned, they're more of a aggressive, confrontational type of community. And they are a non-apologetic community, and they are ready to take any type of action, whatever that may mean, in response to anything that brings them into any sort of ill repute. And what I mean by that is, if you were to in any way say anything bad about the Quran, anything bad about Muhammad or Allah, it could pose a very real life risk for you, in that you could be attacked, you could be maimed, you could have somebody could come at you with a hatchet, you could have sulfuric acid thrown in your face, and they function in a way that is almost very dormant. And what I mean by that is, I have had a friend overseas who was engaged for quite a while in religious debate with a Muslim man at his work, and it went on for quite some time, years even, I think. And eventually this man and his wife snapped, and they turned up to work and they shot and killed a bunch of people, including this man, who has now left a grieving widow behind, and this happened during sort of Barack Obama's sort of era, and this widow is still grieving to this day over the loss of a husband. And so they're not a religion who has a sense of humor. What do I mean by that? Well, there's a series, one or two movies. I think they did a part 2, and I won't mention the name of the film. It's a comedy film. Meet the, and it's kind of the pronunciation's a little bit, I'm not going to say it. And the family, Ben Stiller's in it, and I think Robert De Niro's in it. And Ben Stiller's family is Jewish, and they have a dog. And in the sequel, the dog is named Moses. And at one point, Moses is flushed down the toilet. And in contrast, if this family had been Muslim, and that dog, and Muslims don't really have dogs, so, it's if that were the case, if that dog was named Muhammad, and that dog in that scene had been flushed down the toilet, then the cast and everybody involved in that production would be kind of looking over their shoulder from the time that film hit the cinemas. That's just the nature of Islam, and you don't have to be. Perhaps you do be reminded about Salman Rushdie, who wrote the Satanic Verses back in the 80s, I think, and he went into hiding, and up until I think it was 10 years or so ago, he was speaking at a university, and a Muslim man came out with a cup of sulfuric acid and threw it in his face and blinded him in one eye. And he's still got to look out for himself now with his partial blindness, with whatever other effects occurred during that incident. So they're a real firecracker of the people, and people say, this video is all a bit sort of Islamophobic and all that sort of thing. And the reality is, I'm just calling it what it is and calling it out for what we can plainly see. Mad Monis, who conducted the hold-up at the Lynn Cafe, not many people know this, but he took his children to a local pool in Penrith, while his then girlfriend at the time turned up to an apartment building where his wife was and the kid's mother was, and set her on fire, and she burnt to death. And so I don't know how this guy was sort of walking around. It was funny. Well, it's not funny, but it was odd, peculiar that the video, he recorded a lot of video when he was at the pool with his kids, and as they were leaving, he deliberately moved the camera up and pointed it to the clock. A dead giveaway that he was obviously doing that to show that he wasn't anywhere near the scene of the crime of what happened to his wife. And so this is a man who was deeply disturbed, but nonetheless was functioning in society, and the powers that be saw that he wasn't a threat, despite that and many other things that had come to the fore. There were a bunch of other things, but I don't want to get into them in this video. And so what the average Australian on the street has to understand is that the Middle Eastern mind is completely different in the way it thinks to the Western mind. To a Westerner, if you were to present him with a 2-story house and an in-ground pool and gardeners and maids and staff, a great salary, a great income, a beautiful wife, beautiful kids, great cars, maybe, a lifetime membership to the local golf club, if you were to present that to a Western person, they'd be delighted, and you wouldn't hear boo from them ever again. But if you were to present the same things to a Muslim who has a completely different mindset, he will gladly take all that, but in the course of him having all these things, he will in some way use that to further his religious agenda. And Islam operate in a system of acquisition and conquer. And what that means is that if they buy land in Australia, then that land generally will never ever be sold back outside of the Islamic world. Now, there are exceptions to the rule. You will get some Muslims, maybe moderate Muslims, that might sell a house back to just a normal Aussie. But the general rule is, once they buy a piece of land and they build a school, or they build a mosque, or whatever, a community, that is now their land, and that stays their land forever. And this is how they conquer nations. We have to be reminded that the Middle East wasn't originally filled with Islamic countries. They, over the centuries, they overcame those countries by producing the population in terms of people. Like Muslims often will have multiple wives, and they'll have many, many children, and they'll just drown out wherever they are with offspring. And they play a long game. They play this sort of long game, and eventually the Islamic community becomes so widespread that they begin to implement the necessary infrastructure to establish Sharia law. And and that's going to be no different in the UK. It's going to be no different in France, in Germany, and in Australia. The only countries that I can see are really strong in terms of not bowing to them is Russia, and I'm sure I'm going to leave out a host of countries, and China. Now, China, believe it or not, actually allows Jewish communities there to a degree, because they don't proselytize. They don't usually proselytize outside Jews. And even then, they're proselytizing, their kiruv, their outreach is quite limited, unless it's the Chabad community, the Chabad sect of the Jews. They have a very unprecedented form of kiruv, and started by the Rebbe, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson of blessed memory. So this is what you have to bear in mind. Now, in Australia, being nice to the Jews from a perspective of a blood-sucking politician has no bearing weight or interest or reward, because there's so few of them. There's 118,000 Jews in Australia, and that figure is in decline, whereas there's over 800,000 Muslims in Australia, and Islam is the second most popular religion in Australia, beside Christianity. And it's just growing. Like, just in the last 10 or 20 years, it's just growing everywhere you go. There's an expression that we've had for years called "spot the Aussie," and you really literally are doing that. If you come to a set of street lights somewhere, and you go, okay, spot the Aussie, and it's very difficult to do so. People say, well, we're a multicultural country, but what happens is, by being tolerant to different cultures, to the degree that Australia has been, will eventually allow an aggressive culture to come in and take up residence. And they cannot be reasoned with. You've got to understand that the Islamic world, even the moderates within the Islamic world, are dangerous, because in many cases they provide the infrastructure for the extremist ones in the movement. And don't get me wrong, there are good Muslim people out there. We saw one who helped with the incident that occurred in Bondi, the shopkeeper, the fruiter. But you have to understand that not everybody's a terrorist, right? But we have the wife of a terrorist who provides conjugal relations, washes his clothes, feeds him, looks after his kids. The kids go to school and they're taught that the best thing in the world that you can do is kill a Jew. That is the highest level of obedience to Allah, is martyrdom. And there's no better martyrdom than to be martyred in the course of taking out the life of just one Jew. This is their ideology. This is part of the outline of the Hamas agenda, and it's just a reality. If you look at Muslim schools, especially in the Middle East, and you look at some of their core curriculum, it will make the hairs stand up on the back of your neck. And so from a very young age, a child is taught to hate Jews. Now, why all this focus on the Jews? Why do they always get picked on? Well, the funny thing is, they're the only nation of people in the world that hail back to Semitic times. There is no other culture that's remained intact anywhere near like they were in ancient times. We don't have Babylonians today like Babylonians of ancient times. We don't have Romans today like the Romans of ancient times. We don't have Egyptians today like the Egyptians of ancient times. Anybody in Egypt that says they're an Egyptian, technically they're not, because they don't follow the Egyptian gods. They're just an Arab who was born in Egypt. They're usually a Muslim, and they all call themselves Egyptians. I mean, I guess they're Egyptians because that's what it's still called, and they were born there. But in terms of actually being Egyptians, they're not. There's no Persians anymore. There's no Greeks anymore. I think I said Romans. They've all come and gone. The Nazis have come and gone. The Third Reich. Yet the Jew is still very much, as Mark Twain said, what he has always been. And the reason for that is because they're the chosen people by Hashem. Hashem chose them as his priestly class of mankind. But the problem is, the deal is that they're to maintain their charge. That is to be those who present the Almighty to mankind. And if they're not doing that, and most of them aren't, 80% aren't religious, then it becomes a bit of a difficult situation. And so that's why at certain points throughout history, Jews have had the nations be used against them as a rod of judgment to get them back into line. And so the best way around anti-Semitism is to promote Jews to return to the Torah and to be Torah observant. But this in no way legitimizes anti-Semitism or any type of anti-Israel speak or violence against them, because you don't want to be the demographic or the group or the nation who becomes that rod, because there's a chamber in Gehenna. We read in rabbinic writings, there's actually a chamber in Gehenna that's reserved solely just for the nations who turned on Israel, and it's arrayed with all the punishments and tortures for those that have presented themselves as being so filthy that these are the ones that are going to be used as a thorn in the side of Hashem's chosen people. So I just want to make that clear. Because I had somebody recently say, well, hang on, you're legitimizing anti-Semitism by saying that. No, I'm not. I'm absolutely not. I'm just saying that this is the reason why, and I can prove it from the Tanakh. I've got plenty of verses from the Tanakh, Psalm 105, for example, where it speaks about Hashem changing the heart of the Egyptians to loathe them. It's a verse that's plain and simple, very difficult to interpret any other way. So what is my kind of conclusion on all this? Okay, so the horse is bolted. It's too late. Does that mean we're done? We're done and dusted? No, it doesn't. Well, hang on. Then it's not too late. Well, yes and no. Meaning that things are going to get still worse than they are now, but we can mitigate the damage. But it's up to you to stand against the growing threat of Islam in Australia. And that doesn't mean going out and, causing any trouble, but that means putting people in power that are going to do something about it. You can join the dots on that. And at the same time, present yourself if the opportunity arises to your local Jewish community and tell them you're here to support them, because they are an absolutely pristine, delightful addition to any society, any nation that they happen to be residing in, and they will bring blessings to that nation they're residing in. It's been well documented that throughout history, whenever they have been pushed out of a nation, not long after that, the nation goes downhill economically. Okay, I hope this video doesn't get too many haters. I hope it's been informative. I hope it's sort of given you a little bit more of information of what's going on in a sort of a wider picture. You know, we have to step up. We have to get involved. You have to get involved. You can't just, you know, keep watching Netflix and, you know, going along and seeing live shows and, you know, going to your little sort of holiday house down at, you know, Balmoral or wherever. You have to get involved, and there's plenty of groups that you can contact if you want to be involved with what I am doing. Put a comment underneath the video or whatever, and I'll let you know what I'm doing and how I'm getting myself involved. Anyway, thank you so much for watching the video. Until next time, bye for now.